Hi guys, and welcome back to Movies That Matter with the Viking. Today, let's talk about something that Heroic Hollywood said the other day in a video. They talked that at Warner Brothers there was talk of them doing a DC Black Label film, just like they did with the Joker, but with Bane. So that's a very interesting thing. Of course, Joker was a success, making over $1 billion at the box office on a 50 million budget. Unbelievable success for that film, of course, winning Oscars and Joaquin Phoenix winning Best Actor. Unbelievable stuff. And Warner Bros. Didn't even back that film. They didn't even think it would do that well. And they didn't even receive most of the profits from that film. So they definitely regretted that. But there was talks of a Bane film that has been put away. Maybe because Bane could be appearing in future sequels of Matt Reeves' The Batman. Now, if they did a standalone Bane film, what would it look like? Would it look like the Batman film with George Clooney when Bane was in that? This kind of goofy muscle villain. Didn't really have any lines or didn't really do anything impactful in the film. But that film wasn't really impactful for the character. But then he was brilliant in Christopher Nolan's 2012 The Dark Knight Rises, of course. Tom Hardy, unbelievable actor, portraying the character. And the Nolan world of these DC characters was really about looking at them in terms of a realistic tone. So nobody had these like superpowers or super villains and stuff like that. It was more of a mastermind villains with the Joker, with Bane, with Scarecrow, and then Batman have to use his mind and his muscle to defeat these villains, which was very interesting. And I like kind of realistic tones in comic book films. And that's the route that Todd Phillips went with the Joker, Joaquin Phoenix. He said that the idea of the Joker falling in a vat of chemicals and then his hair turning green and his face turning white, it just wasn't realistic. It didn't make sense. So he wanted to do a proper origin story for the character. Of course, Joker being bullied and then obviously turned from Arthur Fleck to the Joker, and that was his origin story, and then he puts on the makeup and things like that. But he never wanted to go a comic booky route with the character, and that's exactly what the DC Black Label version of Bane would be. Now, is the Batman with Matt Reeves, is that DC Black Label or what is that? It's not really in the DCEU, but I did a video yesterday about what really is the DCEU, and to be honest, it's really everything. The Joker film, the Zack Snyder films, the Shazam, it's all kind of this multiverse of movies that's produced under the DCEU banner. But Bane, now you're thinking of how could you do a standalone Bane film? Would it work? Bane is a very interesting character. The film The Dark Knight Rises was mostly about Bane. It really, really was. It was all about Batman was defeated by Bane, broke his back, and Batman went away. So it was about the story of Bane, and Bane wasn't just a muscle. Of course, Tom Hardy was big in the film, but it was about his mastermind and how he wanted to control and take over Gotham. And that did a very good part for the character, but I would have liked to go deeper. I would have liked to see more. We got to see a little bit of the origin story, but I would have liked to see more. What it was his life like when he was a child. There's a very good comic book that the Heroic Hollywood talked about, which is The Vengeance of Bane, and it goes into this big backstory of Bane. His father was a revolutionist. He died in the revolution, went to this terrible prison. His mother was pregnant. To punish him, they gave him the prison sentence that his father would have so his mother died, and then he grew up in a prison. As a child, he grew up in a prison, and this is how he became Bane. He had a fear of bats when he slept, and he was in there with bad people, so he had to protect himself. And over time he wanted to overcome the demons in his own head, which he did. He got bigger, he got stronger. He's a very intelligent character, Bane. He really, really is. He's not just the muscle that we've seen in the Batman George Clooney film. He's much, much more, and there's so much you can do with the actual character. But that story is about him having a fear of bats, and he kind of takes over the prison, and he breaks out of the prison, and he hears about Batman, and he goes after Batman and Gotham because he thinks that it's his destiny to beat the Batman. And he eventually does. He breaks his back in the comic book, just like he did in The Dark Knight Rises. Batman goes away, and Bane kind of takes over Gotham in that sense with the other villains. But there's so much deepness you can go with the character. All the stuff with him and his mother being in prison, him dealing with the struggle of growing up as a child in the prison. He wouldn't have any. He really was never a child. He probably is an innocent person who was filled with rage and anger. So there's a really cool route you could go with the character. But then also in that story, they did testing on him, did experiment, and that's how he kind of became intoxicated by the venom and was just addicted to that, and he got a little bit bigger and stuff like that. But I think if we were to do a Bane DC Black Label film like the Joker, think the best way would be to go as realistic as possible and maybe even touch on the basis of that comic book, The Vengeance of Bane. I looked into a good bit of it and it sounds interesting and it looks like a really, really good story. It's a two-parter as well. But what I really liked about the Joker was that it brought real world elements into it about poverty and about people who are poor in the city being looked down on upon, and about the rich. And Gotham City kind of really resembled New York City around that time period. So there's a really cool way you could go with Bane if you got the right director, the right actor, and really took that character and that role seriously. You could have something special in your hands, but would it work for a full film? I think it has to be the right story. And Joaquin Phoenix and Todd Phillips did their own thing with the character. And I think with Bane, you'd have to go that route as well. I think you should have Batman as a presence in the film, just like he was kind of a presence. Bruce Wayne was a presence. Thomas Wayne was a presence in the Joker film. I think if you have the character of Batman, he never has to be on screen. Just has to be this kind of this myth, this thing that is talked about in prisons and in Gotham City. Nobody has ever seen him, but people have seen him, and people are afraid of the Bat. And then Bane thinking this is his destiny to take out the Batman because of all the struggles he's dealing with internally. But it needs to be done very well. But it's not going to happen, according to Rogue Hollywood, because they have plans to use Bane in future sequels of the Batman. I think the Matt Reeves Batman world will be very similar to Christopher Nolan's in the way that it won't have superheroes, supervillains with extraordinary abilities. It's not going to be anything like Zack Snyder's world and depiction of the characters with Superman in that world and Batman teaming up with Wonder Woman and stuff like that. I think it's going to be more grounded, toned Batman film like the Dark Knight trilogy. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that, but is it going to be... Like, it sounds like the Batman is going to be more of a psychological film, with Robert Pattinson having to deal with Paul Dano's Riddler and Colin Farrell's The Penguin. It sounds like it's going to be more a psychological, impactful film. Not much of what we've seen in Batman vs Superman with the nightmare sequence, with the warehouse scene, those kind of awesome big scale action sequences. I'm sure there's going to be action in the Matt Reeves Batman film, but I don't know if it's going to be on that scale. I think it's going to be more of a acted film, a film that tells more of a grounded story, like very similar to the Dark Knight trilogy. But I hope it's not too similar. The Dark Knight Rises didn't have much action in the actual film, but it had plenty of story, and that film flies by very quickly. It's very well paced, and it's a long film, but there is parts of it that is a little bit boring. The Dark Knight was done beautifully. That film, I never felt bored. It just seemed like one massive flow. So I hope Matt Reeves can bring elements of that into his world. But Bane, if he's going to use him in future films, I don't think he's going to be experimented on. I don't think he's going to be this huge creature that we've seen in other incarnations of the character. Of course, he's going to be big, but he'll also be a mastermind just like Tom Hardy's Bane was. But I would actually rather see the DC Black Label Bane film than have him in the Matt Reeves film. I'd like Matt Reeves to touch on villains that we haven't really seen. You know, we've seen Two-Face, we've seen the Joker, we've seen Bane. I'd like to see him do something a little bit different. It's been a long time since we've seen the Riddler, and that was more of a comedy film, and there's been even a longer time since we've seen the Penguin. So I'd really like him to touch on other villains, but who knows what kind of idea that Matt Reeves has for his trilogy. We haven't seen anything, only set photos. So I actually don't know. You don't know. We don't know as fans. We just hope that it's good. But I'd rather see a Black Label DC film with Bane than have him in the Batman trilogy. I really would. But who would play him? Of course, people wanted Dave Bautista to play him. And Heroic Hollywood touch on this as well. He has improved his acting, Dave Bautista. He really has. If you watch him in Blade Runner 2049, he has a small role, but he plays it very well. I think with the right director, the right role, the right dialogue, I think he could be a very good Bane, but it needs to be good for him because he's not one of the top quality actors. Look, he's improving. He's a big guy, of course, but I think if it was going to be a standalone film, you'd need someone a little bit more who can act, who can flex their acting muscles a little bit more. But if you had him just as a villain, secondary villain, maybe in a Batman film, I think it could work. But let me know, guys, what you think. Would you think the idea of a Bane film would work, or are you okay with seeing him appear in future films, maybe in the Robert Pattinson Batman world? And next I want to talk about the Flash solo film, which is coming out in 2022, being directed by Andy, I always mess up his name, Andy Muschietti, the It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 director. I think he did a very good job in those films, and I'm delighted to see another horror director come into the DCU and produce another film. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does. There's a lot of talk about being a Flashpoint film. Of course, we had reports saying that the DCU was dead and the Snyderverse of that universe was dead, so Flashpoint was going to retcon everything and change everything to be Robert Pattinson as the Batman, and Ben Affleck's Batman never happened and all this. But now Zack Snyder's Justice League is happening, so that kind of idea has kind of been squashed and put out the window, because how can it make sense that they're going to do like that? I still think they're going to do a Flashpoint to an extent, but there's been talk that Cyborg, Ray Fisher, could appear in the Flash film. Now, I did a video on why I think as a Cyborg series would work for HBO Max, but it would cost a lot of money. Him appearing in the Flash film does make a lot of sense. If you remember when Flash Ezra Miller teamed up or made an appearance on the CW crossover with the TV version of Flash, Grant Gustin, he said, wow, it worked, kind of, Victor was right, referring to time travel and him getting back to this kind of time period. So it shows that Victor helped him go back or find a pocket in time to go to. Now, we know that the Flash in Batman vs Superman came back to warn Bruce Wayne about Lois, and of course Zack Snyder has unveiled that in the future we see where and how he went back, and Victor was a big part of helping Ezra Miller's Flash time travel and go back in time and change things or help things in a better way. So if Cyborg was to appear in the Flash film, it would make a lot of sense, and I think it will make even more sense after we see Zack Snyder's Justice League, because Zack has said that Flash uses time travel in that film as well, and Cyborg probably helps him. Cyborg does see into the future in Zack Snyder's Justice League. He does see a nightmare sequence similar to what we've seen in Batman vs Superman. I don't know what's in that nightmare sequence, if it's him in it or if he sees Bruce Wayne in it. I don't know exactly, but he's supposed to not time travel but see into the future through the mother boxes. So that's interesting, and maybe that will link up. Maybe it was always supposed to link into the Flash solo film. Ray Fisher is a very good person. I really like his vibe on social media. He does lives on Instagram, and he has Twitch as well. But he's been very active and interactive with the Snyder Cut movement, and he's such a good, positive guy, and he stays away from the hate, and I really like that about him. But him appearing in the Flash solo film, I think would be really, really cool. If we're not going to get a Cyborg solo film, which I think would be a unique thing to get in the comic book genre, I think would work very well. If not, then you can implement him into the Flash solo film, and I think it would work very well. Now, the Flash and Cyborg, well, the Flash mostly was supposed to be more of a comedic character in Zack Snyder's world. He was to bring some light to the kind of darkness that we had in Batman vs Superman and Man of Steel, and Aquaman was supposed to be the same. Of course, Jason Momoa got his Aquaman film. That was a success. It's a very funny film, but it's also a serious film. I think there's a difference of telling a goofy comedy comic book movie and telling a realistic dark tone themed film with some light humor in it. I think it can work very well, and it's always worked for DC when they do that kind of thing. Shazam did it very, very well in my opinion, and I think the Flash can have that serious element of his mother being killed, of his father being in prison, him feeling guilty about that stuff, whatever stuff happened in Zack Snyder's Justice League, of course trying to protect his identity from Iris West and dealing with his love for her. There's some dark elements there, and some struggles that the character can go through, but he can also be a happy character with some very good humor, and make light of serious situations with some jokes that suits his kind of personality. And I think if you bring Ray Fisher into that, he's supposed to be the heart of Justice League, and he's probably a little bit more of a serious character, but at the end of Zack Snyder's Justice League, he's probably a little bit more hopeful and getting used to his surroundings as being Cyborg. And I think the Flash, the Cyborg dynamic would be very, very funny, would be very, very cool. You know, Ezra Miller kind of using his comedic element to interact with Ray Fisher's Cyborg could be something that could be really, really cool to see, and I'm all for it, definitely. Look, if it's going to be a Flashpoint film, you're going to need some Justice League characters in there. You really, really are. If you're not going to get Henry Cavill's Superman to appear or Ben Affleck's Batman, then you can have Cyborg, maybe Jason Momoa. But who knows, Henry Cavill's new deal could have him making cameos in these type of films, and that would be really, really cool. Wonder Woman, of course. But who knows what will happen through the Flashpoint occurrence in the Flash film. Will we see Thomas Wayne? Will we see Bruce Wayne? what way would things go. But I'm all for seeing these kind of characters appear in the Flash film because it makes sense. It kind of doesn't make that much sense in, say, an Aquaman film or a Wonder Woman film to see Cyborg appear, or the Flash. It makes more sense for these type of characters to appear in a Flash film. Of course, with him being a speedster and being able to manipulate, go back into time, he might be able to see things that you wouldn't see in an Aquaman film or a Wonder Woman film. So I'm all for that. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about the Bane film. The possibility of that was not going to happen now, but the possibility of what might have happened, just like in the essence of the Joker. But also, are you happy to see Ray Fisher, Cyborg, appear in the Flash solo film? Let me know what way you would like to see that happen. Let's try and get this video to 20 likes, guys, if you can. Also, give it a like, give it a comment, subscribe, come and engage with me. Talk about movies, that's what we love doing. Come follow me on Twitter at MovieBuff100. Come follow me on Instagram, Movies That Matter, The Viking. And you also find me on Facebook at Zack Schneider's Justice League. Always, guys, until next time, stay positive!